What happened in that nursing home room will make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. This 82-year-old Vietnam War hero discovered something that would shatter his world, and what he did next left everyone speechless. Harold Mitchell sat in his small room at Meadowbrook Nursing Home, his hands trembling as he read the letter for the fifth time. In his 82 years of life, through combat in Vietnam, through the loss of his wife, through countless challenges, he had never felt rage like this burning in his chest. The letter was from a military memorabilia collector who wanted to verify the authenticity of certain medals that had appeared for sale online. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Distinguished Service Cross. These were Harold's medals, his honors, his blood, but Harold had never put them up for sale. His eyes moved to the corner of his room, where the small dresser stood. The top drawer was slightly open. That drawer had held a velvet box for decades, a box containing the medals he had earned in the jungles of Vietnam. Now that box sat empty except for a single piece of paper. Harold walked over, his legs weaker than they used to be, but his resolve giving him strength. He opened the drawer completely and picked up the note. The handwriting was familiar. It read, "Dad, I need these. You're not using them anyway." Marcus, his son. His 43-year-old son Marcus had stolen his military honors. Harold remembered now. 3 weeks ago, Marcus had visited, unusually affectionate that day. He had hugged his father, talked about old times, even stayed for lunch. Harold had been so happy, now he understood. It had all been a performance, a distraction so Marcus could steal from him while Harold used the bathroom. Harold walked into the hallway, his steps heavy but determined. Old age had slowed his body, but his mind remained sharp, his memory still clear. He had learned things in Vietnam that never left him. Identify your enemy, make your plan, fight back. At the nurse's station, young nurse Lisa looked up. "Mr. Mitchell, are you okay? Your face is really red." "Lisa," Harold said, controlling the fury in his voice, "I need to call my son. It's urgent." She handed him the phone. Harold dialed Marcus's number. His hands still trembled, but this time, not from fear, from injustice. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then voicemail. Marcus's cheerful voice. "Hey, this is Marcus Mitchell. Can't come to the phone right now, leave a message." Harold hung up without speaking. He did not want to leave a message. He wanted to look his son in the eyes and ask him how he could do this. But the real shock was still coming. What Harold did not know yet was that his son had not just stolen the medals to sell them. The truth was far darker than anyone imagined. That night Harold could not sleep. He lay in bed turning over and over, his mind filled with memories. He remembered Vietnam. He remembered 1968. He had been only 25 years old then, young, excited, ready to serve his country. He remembered that terrible night near Saigon, the firefight, the screams, the smell of blood. His squad mate David had been hit. Harold had lifted him onto his back and run 300 yards under enemy fire to reach the evacuation helicopter. David had lived. Harold had earned the Bronze Star. Now that medal, that physical proof of his sacrifice, was being sold on the internet by his own son. The next morning, Harold woke early. Actually, he had never really slept. The sun had barely risen, but he was ready. He dressed in his best pants, combed his white hair, looked at himself in the mirror. Deep lines marked his weathered face. His hair had gone completely white, but in his eyes that old determination still burned. "Today we fight, soldier," he whispered to himself. At breakfast in the dining hall, his old friend George sat down next to him. George was also a Vietnam veteran, 69 years old and the second oldest vet at Meadowbrook after Harold. "Harold, buddy, what happened to you?" George said, reading Harold's expression. "You look like you're going to war." Harold told him everything. The letter from the collector, the empty velvet box, Marcus's note, the unanswered phone call, the silence. As George listened, his face fell, then flushed with anger. "That can't be right," George said, hitting his fist on the table. "Those medals are earned with your blood, your sweat. How dare your son do this?" I don't know, Harold said quietly. But I'm going to find out. George looked around. There were other veterans in the dining hall. Walter, Bobby, Frank, all old, all sick, all returned from Vietnam. George called them to the table. Gentlemen, we have a problem. Harold's son stole his medals. He's selling them. Everyone at the table went silent. 4 old veterans' eyes turned to Harold. Then Walter spoke. Is this true, Harold? Harold nodded. Then Bobby said, his voice firm, we're going to stop this. That's when the nursing home staff realized something extraordinary was about to happen. These were not just lonely old men anymore. They were soldiers, and they were angry. Over the next hour, the veterans formed a plan. George suggested they contact the online auction site directly. Walter said they should call Marcus and confront him. Bobby wanted to contact a lawyer. Frank, the quietest of the group, said something that changed everything. We should call the newspaper. Harold looked at him. The newspaper. Think about it, Frank said. Your son is selling stolen military honors. That's not just theft, that's dishonor. That's disrespecting every veteran who served. If we make this public, he won't be able to hide. Harold thought about this. Part of him wanted to protect Marcus, to keep this private, to believe his son had just made a terrible mistake. But another part of him, the soldier part, knew that some things could not be forgiven quietly. Some battles had to be fought in the open. Okay, Harold said. Let's call the newspaper. Lisa, the nurse, overheard their conversation. She walked over to the table. Mr. Mitchell, I don't want to intrude, but I have a friend who works at the local news station. She does human interest stories. Would you want me to call her? Harold looked up at Lisa. She was young, maybe 28, with kind eyes. She had always treated him with respect, always asked about his service, always thanked him for what he had done. Now she was offering to help. Yes, Harold said. Please call her. What Harold's family saw in the nursing home would change everything. But first, the truth about Marcus needed to come out. Lisa made the call. Within 2 hours, a reporter named Jennifer Torres arrived at Meadowbrook. She was in her mid-30s, professional, carrying a notebook and a recording device. She sat down with Harold in the common room. Mr. Mitchell, she said gently, tell me what happened. Harold told her everything. As he spoke, Jennifer took notes. She asked to see the empty velvet box. She asked to see Marcus's note. She asked about Harold's service record. Harold showed her everything. He showed her old photographs from Vietnam, pictures of his unit, letters he had written home to his young wife. He showed her the scar on his shoulder where shrapnel had hit him, the reason for his Purple Heart. This is an incredible story, Jennifer said, and I'm so sorry this happened to you. With your permission, I'd like to run this story tomorrow. Harold hesitated. Once this story went public, there would be no going back. Marcus would be exposed. The family would be humiliated. But what choice did he have? Run the story, Harold said. The next day, the article appeared on the front page of the local newspaper and on the news station's website. The headline read, Local Veterans War Medals Stolen and Sold by His Own Son. The article detailed Harold's service, his injuries, his medals, and Marcus's betrayal. It included a photograph of Harold holding the empty velvet box. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By noon, hundreds of people had shared the article online. Veterans groups across the state began calling the nursing home, asking how they could help. A GoFundMe page appeared, started by strangers to help Harold if he needed legal assistance. Local businesses offered to donate money. People started showing up at Meadowbrook, asking to meet Harold, to shake his hand, to thank him for his service. And Marcus? Marcus went silent. He did not call, he did not visit. He disappeared. But the family secret was darker than anyone imagined. 2 days after the article ran, Harold received another visitor. A woman in her 50s walked into Meadowbrook and asked to see him. Her name was Patricia, and she introduced herself as Marcus's ex-wife. Mr. Mitchell, she said, sitting down across from him in the common room. "I need to tell you something. Marcus didn't steal your medals just to sell them for money. There's more to it." Harold felt his chest tighten. "What do you mean?" Patricia took a deep breath. "Marcus has a gambling problem. He's had it for years. He's in debt to some very dangerous people. He needed money fast, and he knew those medals were valuable. But here's the thing. He didn't just take your medals, he's been stealing from everyone. He took money from our kids' college fund. He forged my signature on a loan. He stole jewelry from his sister. Your medals were just the latest in a long pattern." Harold felt sick. His son was not just a thief. He was an addict. A gambler who had destroyed his own family and was now destroying his father's legacy. "Why are you telling me this?" Harold asked. "Because you deserve to know the truth," Patricia said. "And because I want you to know that what he did to you, he's done to all of us. You're not alone in this. We've all been hurt by him." After Patricia left, Harold sat alone in his room for a long time. The anger was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Sadness. Grief. Not just for what Marcus had done, but for who Marcus had become. This was not the little boy Harold had raised. This was not the son who used to sit on his lap and ask about his war stories. This was a stranger wearing his son's face. When the lawyer knocked on his door 3 days later, Harold was ready. The lawyer, a middle-aged man named David Chen, had offered his services for free after reading the article. "Mr. Mitchell," David said, "I've done some research. Your son posted your medals on 3 different auction sites. 2 of them have already been sold. One went to a collector in Texas. The other went to a museum in Pennsylvania. But I've contacted both buyers and explained the situation. They're willing to return the medals." The 3rd auction was stopped before it completed. Harold felt relief wash over him. "They're coming back?" "Yes," David said. "But there's something else. I think you should consider pressing criminal charges against Marcus. What he did is theft. It's also a violation of federal law. The Stolen Valor Act protects military medals from being fraudulently used or sold." Harold thought about this. Pressing charges meant Marcus could go to jail. It meant the family would be torn apart even more, but it also meant justice. It meant standing up for what was right. The envelope contained something Harold never expected. A week after his conversation with the lawyer, Harold received a thick manila envelope in the mail. Inside were letters. Dozens of letters. They were from people all over the country. Veterans. Active duty soldiers. Military families. All writing to thank him. To express outrage at what had happened. To offer support. One letter stood out. It was from a man named David Thompson. The name was familiar, but Harold could not place it at first. Then he read the letter. "Dear Harold, you probably don't remember me. My name is David Thompson. You saved my life in Vietnam in 1968. I was the soldier you carried 300 yards under fire. I made it home because of you. I went on to have a family, a career, a life. I owe all of that to your courage. When I read what your son did, I was devastated. You deserve better. You deserve honor. I am flying out to see you next week. I want to thank you in person, something I should have done 40 years ago. Your brother in arms, David." Harold read the letter 3 times. David Thompson, the young soldier with the chest wound. The kid who had been crying for his mother. Harold had almost forgotten about him. Over the decades, pushed the memory down with all the other painful memories from that war. But David had not forgotten. When David Thompson walked into Meadowbrook the following Tuesday, Harold almost did not recognize him. David was in his late 60s. Now gray-haired, wearing a suit, walking with a slight limp. But when their eyes met, something passed between them. Recognition, brotherhood, the unspoken bond between men who had faced death together. They embraced. David was crying. So was Harold. "You saved my life," David said, his voice breaking. "I never got to thank you properly. I was evacuated, sent home, and by the time I recovered, you had already rotated out. I tried to find you, but I didn't know where to look. I did what any soldier would do. Harold said. No, David said firmly. You did what a hero does, and what your son did to you is unforgivable. Over the next hour, David told Harold about his life. He had become a teacher, married his high school sweetheart, raised 3 daughters. He had thought about Harold often over the years, wondered if he was alive, hoped he was happy. When he saw the newspaper article, he knew he had to come. I brought something for you, David said, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a framed photograph. It showed 2 young soldiers in Vietnam, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling despite the mud and exhaustion. Harold recognized himself immediately. And there was David, 22 years old, skinny, alive. I've kept this picture on my desk for 40 years, David said. But I think you should have it now. So you remember that what you did mattered, that you mattered. Harold took the photograph, his hands shaking. He stared at the young faces, remembering that moment, that brief pause in the hell of war when they had smiled for a camera. That's when the nursing home staff couldn't believe what they witnessed. Over the next 2 weeks, more veterans started showing up at Meadowbrook. Some were men Harold had served with directly. Others were veterans who had simply been moved by his story. They came from neighboring states, driving hours just to shake his hand, to sit with him, to remind him that his service had value. The local VFW chapter organized a ceremony at Meadowbrook. They invited the press, the mayor, veterans groups. On a Saturday morning, the nursing home's common room was packed with over 100 people. Harold sat in a place of honor at the front, wearing his old uniform jacket that still fit surprisingly well. The commander of the VFW stepped forward with a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to honor a true American hero. Harold Mitchell served his country with distinction. He earned his medals through courage, through sacrifice, through love of his fellow soldiers. What happened to those medals was a tragedy. But what happened next showed the true spirit of our veteran community. Today, we're not just returning Harold's medals, we're reminding him, and reminding everyone here, that heroes are never forgotten. One by one, the medals were presented back to Harold: the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the Distinguished Service Cross. Each one was placed in a new velvet box, this one engraved with Harold's name and rank. As each medal was presented, the room erupted in applause. Harold tried to hold back tears but failed. These were not tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of gratitude, of vindication, of being seen and valued. But what about Marcus? The question hung in the air. Harold had not heard from his son since the article ran. Marcus had not called, had not written, had not apologized. It was as if he had vanished. Then 3 weeks after the ceremony, Harold received a phone call. It was from a rehabilitation center 2 states away. Marcus had checked himself in for gambling addiction treatment. He wanted to speak to his father. Harold agreed to take the call. When Marcus's voice came through the phone, it sounded different. Smaller, broken. "Dad?" Marcus said. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know how to ask for forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable. I stole from you. I dishonored you. I hurt you in the worst possible way. I'm sick, Dad. I'm an addict. That doesn't excuse what I did. But it's the truth. I'm getting help now. Real help. And one day, if you'll let me, I want to try to make this right. I know I can't give you back what I took, but I can try to be the son you deserved." Harold listened. Part of him wanted to hang up, to cut Marcus out of his life forever. But another part, the father part, heard the pain in his son's voice. He heard the genuine remorse. He heard a man who had hit bottom and was trying to climb back up. "Marcus," Harold said slowly, "you hurt me more than anyone ever has, even more than the enemy in Vietnam, because they were strangers. You're my son. But if you're serious about getting help, if you're serious about changing, then I'll give you a chance. One chance. Don't waste it." "I won't, Dad," Marcus said, crying now. "I promise I won't." After 70 years, Harold finally told the truth he had been holding inside since the day Marcus was born. He had been afraid of being a father, afraid he would fail, afraid he would mess up this tiny human who depended on him. And in some ways, he felt he had failed. He had worked too much, been too strict, not said, "I love you" enough. Maybe that was part of why Marcus had turned out this way. Or maybe Marcus's problems were his own to own. Harold did not know. He would never know. But what he did know now was that family, even broken family, was worth fighting for. 6 months passed. Marcus completed his rehabilitation program. He got a job at a warehouse. He started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings. He sent letters to Harold every week, updating him on his progress, apologizing again and again, slowly rebuilding trust brick by brick. Harold watched from Meadowbrook as his son tried to put his life back together. The medals sat in their new velvet box on his dresser, returned and honored. The photograph of him and David from Vietnam hung on his wall. The letters from veterans around the country were stored in a folder that he looked through on hard days. One afternoon, Harold sat in the common room with George, Walter, Bobby, and Frank. They were playing cards, talking about old times, laughing at bad jokes. The news was on in the background, something about politics. None of them were really paying attention. "You know what, boys?" Harold said, putting down his cards. "I've been thinking, what happened with Marcus was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But what came after was maybe the best thing. All those people who reached out, all those veterans who showed up, David finding me after all these years. I got to see that my life mattered. Not many people get that gift." George nodded. "You're right, brother. You're absolutely right. And you know what else?" Harold continued. "I'm done being angry. Anger kept me going for a while. Gave me purpose. Made me fight. But I don't need it anymore. I'm 82 years old. I don't know how many years I have left. I want to spend them in peace." Walter raised his coffee cup. "To peace." They all raised their cups. To peace. The final twist came a year after the medal theft. Harold received a letter from the Texas collector who had originally purchased his bronze star. The collector wrote that he had decided to donate the medal to a military museum, but he wanted to do something else first. He wanted to meet Harold and create a traveling exhibit about stolen military valor, using Harold's story as the centerpiece. The exhibit would tour schools and community centers, teaching young people about the importance of honoring veterans. Harold agreed. The exhibit opened 6 months later. It featured Harold's medals, his photographs from Vietnam, interviews with David Thompson and other soldiers who had served with him, and information about the Stolen Valor Act. Thousands of school children visited the exhibit. They learned about sacrifice, honor, courage, and the price of freedom. Harold attended the opening day of the exhibit. He walked slowly through the displays, leaning on his cane, reading the text panels, looking at the photographs of his younger self. Children approached him nervously, asking questions, thanking him for his service. He told them stories about Vietnam, about his friends who did not make it home, about what it means to serve something bigger than yourself. At the end of the day, as the museum was closing, Harold stood in front of the display case holding his bronze star. The medal gleamed under the lights. Below it, a plaque read, "This medal represents the courage of Specialist Harold Mitchell, who risked his life to save a fellow soldier under enemy fire." It was stolen by his son and sold online. Thanks to the veteran community, it was recovered and returned. This medal reminds us that honor cannot be bought or sold. It must be earned, and it must be remembered. Harold stared at those words for a long time. Earned, remembered. Yes, that was right. That was true. Marcus came to visit Harold the following month. It was his first visit to Meadowbrook in over a year. He walked into Harold's room nervously, carrying flowers. Harold looked up from his book and studied his son's face. Marcus looked different. Healthier, sober, humble. "Hi, Dad," Marcus said quietly. "Hi, son," Harold replied. They sat together for an hour, talking carefully at first, then more easily. Marcus apologized again, not with excuses this time but with genuine understanding of what he had done. Harold listened, and finally, truly forgave. "You know," Harold said, "I've been thinking about forgiveness For a long time, I couldn't imagine forgiving you, but then I realized that holding on to anger was just hurting me. It wasn't hurting you. So I'm letting it go, not forgetting what happened, but letting go of the poison." Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm grateful for it. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it." "That's all I ask," Harold said. As Marcus left that day, Harold watched him walk down the hallway and out of the nursing home. He did not know if his son would stay sober, would stay honest, would keep his promises, but he knew he had given him a chance. And sometimes, a chance is all anyone needs. Harold Mitchell passed away peacefully 3 years later at the age of 85. He died in his sleep at Meadowbrook, surrounded by photographs of his wife, his military unit, and his family. His medals sat in their velvet box on his dresser. His funeral was attended by over 300 people, including veterans from across the country, David Thompson and his family, and Marcus, who delivered a eulogy about redemption and second chances. The traveling exhibit about stolen valor continued for years after Harold's death, educating thousands of people. His story became a case study in veteran advocacy programs. The Stolen Valor Act was strengthened, partly because of the attention his case received. And in a small nursing home in the Midwest, 5 old veterans still meet every morning for coffee and cards. They tell stories about their friend Harold, about his courage in war and in life, about his fight for justice and his capacity for forgiveness. They make sure that new residents and staff members know his story, because some stories need to be told. Some heroes need to be remembered. What started as a betrayal became a testament to the power of community, the strength of the veteran bond, and the possibility of redemption. Harold's last stand was not fought with weapons, but with truth, dignity, and the refusal to let dishonor have the final word. His story reminds us that heroes come in all ages, that family is complicated and painful and worth fighting for, and that sometimes the greatest victories happen not on battlefields but in quiet nursing homerooms where old soldiers refuse to surrender. Harold Mitchell was a hero twice. Once in Vietnam, when he saved a life under fire, and once in his 80s, when he stood up for honor and proved that courage has no expiration date.